welcome back to the Deep Dive. Okay, so today we're turning our attention to one of comedy's most, let's say, candid, chaotic, and definitely complex figures, Robert Young Lee Jr., but, everyone just knows him as Bobby Lee.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you've been following his career at all, I mean, the evolution is incredible, isn't it? From that Semenon sketch comedy stuff to basically being a founding father of the modern video podcast. His story's got so much more texture than just the highlights.
Totally. And that's our mission today, really. We want to synthesize the journey, the personal and professional stuff that's documented in the source materials we've looked at. We're going to trace his path from, his San Diego roots, that really tough youth, right up to now, where he's a foundational figure in sketch comedy, sure, but also this pioneer in independent digital media.
And what's really striking, I think, is that duality you mentioned. We're not just ticking off career milestones. We have to look at the personal resilience that's right there alongside it all, documented step by step almost.
Yeah, it's inseparable. Okay, so let's kick off with the vitals, just to set the scene. Born September 17th, 1971, San Diego, California. And his work, it spans stand-up, film, TV, and, of course, podcasting.
And the comedy itself is pretty broad. You've got observational stuff, yeah, but he often goes into black comedy, blue comedy, tackling really sensitive things head on.
Like what kind of things?
Well, human sexuality, American politics, gender differences, just basic human behavior, but with this, raw candor.
And that candor, that's really what defines where he is now, right? He's co-hosting Bad Friends with Andrew Santino, which is massive.
Yeah.
Started in 2020.
Huge.
And then there's the earlier one, TigerBelly, which is so culturally significant. He co-hosts that with Kalia LaCoon. These two shows, they're kind of the peak of that big entrepreneurial shift he made.
But that shift, it took decades to get there. And the resilience, like you said, it really starts way back in his childhood. Which kind of brings us to section 1, right? That really unconventional path he took towards comedy.
Okay, yeah, let's dive into that. Starting in Poway, California, that's where he grew up with his younger brother, Steve. Parents were Korean immigrants, Jeannie and Robert Lee.
Right, and the sources mentioned the local schools he went to, Painted Rock, Twin Peaks, Poway High. But the crucial context here, I think, is the family environment. It was all about hard work, owning their own business. His parents had clothing stores in Escondido and Encinitas.
And that detail, it feels really pivotal because, being the eldest son in an immigrant family with small businesses, there's often this really strong, maybe unspoken expectation that you'll join the family business, eventually take over.
Exactly. So that sets up this immediate, fundamental conflict when he decides to go down this totally unstable path of comedy instead.
Right. Such a different world.
Yeah. But even before comedy, there was this little hint of performance. The sources mentioned he was on a breakdancing team in high school.
Oh, really? Breakdancing?
Yeah. So it shows maybe an early lean towards being on stage, physical performance, even if nobody saw it as a career path back then.
Yeah.
After high school, he did briefly go to Palomar College, but, that didn't last long before this big turning point.
Okay, here we go. This is where fate, or maybe just circumstance, takes a really sharp turn. The stand-up origin story, 1994. It wasn't like he planned it meticulously. It sounds almost accidental.
Totally accidental. He was working in a coffee shop/restaurant, and the sources say it just, poof, closed down abruptly.
Oh.
He needed work, so he literally just walked next door. And what was next door?
Let me guess. The Comedy Store.
The Comedy Store in San Diego, yeah. He started working there, just, doing odd jobs for a few months.
Wow. Just being there. Proximity. Right. That's got to be the biggest ingredient sometimes in comedy, just being in the environment.
Absolutely. And because he was there, he eventually, plucked up the courage, got on stage during an amateur night, and that first set, apparently, that was it. That was the spark.
And things moved fast after that, didn't they?
Unbelievably fast. The sources show, within just 1 year, he's getting offers to open for pretty big names at the time, Pauly Shore, Carlos Mencia.
Wow.
And that success immediately led to him working regularly at the main Comedy Store, the legendary one in L.A.
So hang on. In about a year, he goes from working odd jobs next to a defunct coffee shop to being a regular feature at the Comedy Store in L.A. That's meteoric.
It really is.
That kind of speed you'd think would bring instant validation, right? But actually, it seems like it kind of made the distance with his family even bigger.
Which brings us to that whole parental support thing, or lack thereof, initially.
Yeah, and Lee's been super open about this, about that initial conflict. His parents, they had those traditional values, the hopes tied up in the family business.
Yeah.
They were distinctly unsupportive at first.
He talked about it pretty bluntly, didn't he? Said something like, for the first few years of his career, this time when he's actually killing it professionally, his parents barely spoke to him.
Yeah. Can you imagine that? Achieving this dream but feeling totally isolated from your family. Brutal.
But the turning point, the story about that, it's such a perfect kind of poignant illustration of the gap they were dealing with, culturally and vocationally. The reconciliation apparently kicked off after he was on The Tonight Show with Jay Leno.
Right. The legendary phone call from his dad.
Exactly. His father calls him up, but not to say, great job, or anything.
No, he asks how much Bobby had to pay to get on the show.
Which just cuts right to the bone, doesn't it? That immigrant mindset, maybe? That success in this, like, baffling industry like Hollywood. It must be about money, not talent. They just couldn't wrap their heads around being a comedian as a real job.
It's not lack of love. Maybe just,
Yeah.
no frame of reference, like you said.
But the sources do say that after that appearance, his dad did apologize. Said sorry for not supporting the comedy thing before. That was like the first big step, healing that divide.
And that healing eventually led to actual family collaboration later on, which is pretty cool. Shows they bridged that gap somehow. His younger brother, Steve, started showing up in non-speaking roles on MADtv.
And his whole immediate family was even in one specific sketch on the show.
Wow.
And then, get this, in 2007, showing how far things had come, he actually pitched a sitcom to Comedy Central. The idea was it'd be about a Korean family, starring his own family.
No way. That's incredible. From barely speaking to pitching a sitcom together. That's quite a journey for them.
It really is a total transformation.
Okay, so the family starts coming around, even gets involved. And that timeline takes us right into the next big phase for him professionally. Sketch comedy and making that move into acting.
Yeah, and obviously that phase is just dominated by MADtv. He joined the cast in 2001, and that was, like, instantly groundbreaking. The sources are clear. He was the show's first and only Asian cast member during his entire run.
Which meant huge visibility, obviously, but also, man, the pressure.
Immense pressure.
Being the only one, especially back then, early 2000s sketch comedy, that often meant getting pushed in the roles that, relied pretty heavily on stereotypes for the joke.
And this is something the sources really bring out, highlighting his own internal conflict with it. Like, he got famous doing these characters, but he's openly talked about dreading certain roles.
Yeah, I remember reading that. He specifically mentioned playing bass on Connie-chan.
And those average Asian skits.
Right. Which, talk about a psychological burden. You're getting success, right? Job security, fame, people recognize you.
Yeah.
But the price is playing characters that maybe undermine or at least lean into the very stereotypes you and your community are fighting against.
Yeah. Especially tough for a comedian whose later work, like we'll get to, is all about exploring Asian American identity with way more nuance. That MADtv era must have been artistically kind of agonizing at times.
Must have been.
Yeah.
But despite that, he stayed for so long. That says a lot about his talent, his commitment, maybe just his professional grit.
Totally. He was a core part of that cast until the show got canceled in 2009. That's an 8-year run, solid. And he even came back for that brief revival on the CW in 2016.
Right. And that stability, that platform MADtv gave him, it definitely let him leverage that visibility into film roles, TV roles, signaling that shift into being a broader actor, not just a sketch guy.
Okay, let's look at some of those key roles and film highlights then. He popped up in that 2004 cult hit, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle.
Oh, yeah, Kenneth Park.
Kenneth Park, exactly. And he came back for the sequel in 2011, too.
And you also see him fitting into other big comedies around that time, right? Like Pineapple Express in 2008.
And Sacha Baron Cohen's The Dictator in 2012, where he played Mr. Lau. So he's showing he can move from sketch character work to being a reliable comedic actor in movies.
But his later TV stuff, it feels like maybe a deliberate shift, doesn't it? Towards more grounded roles, or at least less.
Yeah.
Less broad, maybe. He co-starred in that ABC sitcom, Splitting Up Together.
Yeah, from 2018 to 2019. But I agree. I think the real measure of his versatility comes through in some of the recurring characters he played later, like Jin Jian on the Magnum PI reboot.
Right, he was on that for a while, 2019 to 2023. That's a sustained role, kind of dramatic, kind of comedic, on a network procedural. Pretty different.
And then you contrast that with his role as Dr. Kang on Reservation Dogs on FX Hulu, which got a lot of acclaim.
Oh yeah, Dr. Kang was fantastic. So cynical, burned out, world-weary. It was such a nuanced performance.
Exactly. That character, Dr. Kang, it really felt like a conscious departure from the high energy, sometimes stereotypical stuff from MADtv. It showed he had this dramatic subtlety, this emotional depth that maybe got a bit lost in the earlier work.
Yeah, definitely.
And during this period, he's also doing these side projects that, looking back, kind of seemed like they were preparing him for the digital thing. He hosted the MusiCares MAP Fund benefit concert in 2013.
Okay.
And critically, back in 2012, he got hired to reboot Maker Studios' YouTube comedy channel, The Station.
Ah, Maker Studios. Right.
Yeah.
That experience put him right in the middle of that whole emerging world of independent online content. Early days still, but significant.
Totally. It gave him the blueprint, maybe the foresight, for what turned out to be his biggest career pivot yet, which is Section 3, the podcasting revolution. He didn't just ride that wave, he kind of helped build the boat.
He really did. And his success there is built on this, dual podcast empire,
Yeah.
right? You've got Bad Friends with Andrew Santino, the huge hit that kicked off in 2020.
Massive. But the real foundation for his indie media career, you gotta say, is TigerBelly.
Yeah, let's focus on the start of TigerBelly. That began earlier, 2015, initially co-hosted with Kalila Kuhn. And, even though their personal relationship ended in 2022, the podcast keeps going, which says a lot about their dedication to that shared creation.
It really does. And the show's important not just for the content, but its whole model. It's video and audio, usually 60, 90 minutes. The sources point out the team behind it, Gilbert Gallen on tech, George Kimmel producing.
Right.
And even the intro song Shadow Gook, which he co-wrote and performed with Kuhn. It's just an example of the really personal, almost provocative ownership they take.
And the content itself. This is why TigerBelly feels so revolutionary, especially if you think back to those MADtv struggles we talked about. The conversations are super personal. Yeah, they touch on pop culture, but they often dig deep into really crucial Asian American issues.
Like what specifically?
Things related to the entertainment industry, adolescence, sexuality, ethnicity, racism, politics, all sorts of stuff.
So it's like the ultimate reclaiming of his own narrative power, isn't it? After spending years playing roles he apparently dreaded, dictated by network TV, he co-creates a space where he defines how they talk about Asian American identity. It feels like this huge, creative, maybe even emotional relief.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is how it actually started. It wasn't even his main podcast idea at first, was it?
No. He was apparently working on a totally different pitch with Eric Griffin for all things comedy, but that kind of fizzled out.
Right.
Instead, TigerBelly sort of grew out of a personal crisis. Kalila Kuhn was starting a podcast while she was recovering from heart surgery, just needed something to do. Lee was helping her out. Then he started appearing on it, and that just took off. It had more momentum than the other idea. So he shifted his focus completely to doing TigerBelly with her. So yeah, this thing, born out of necessity during recovery, ended up becoming one of the most influential video podcasts out there.
That's wild.
Yeah.
But running a show that's that candid, that open, it means you're constantly under the microscope, right? Which brings us to that whole controversy thing, the Tijuana story that blew up again in 2023.
Yeah, that was rough. Clips resurfaced in April 2023. Lee recounting this story involving, as he described it, a young adult prostitute in Tijuana, and it just ignited this huge online backlash. Allegations, intense criticism about the content itself.
And it really highlights that tricky line, doesn't it, between dark comedy, shock humor, and how people perceive it, especially when it's told like a personal story on a podcast. That feeling of intimacy makes people maybe expect more literal truth.
Exactly. The perceived authenticity is higher. So Lee had to address it, right? He used his own platform, TigerBelly, later that month to do damage control, basically.
And the clarification was key. He had to come out and say, point blank, the story wasn't true. It was totally made up.
Yeah, he called it a dark joke, said it was pieced together from a couple of awful bits. The fact that he had to go on his own show to explain that a shocking story was fiction, it just shows how intense that accountability is now in the digital age.
It definitely signals a shift, maybe, for dark comedy. When any clip can be pulled, stripped of context, and live forever online, the risk is your joke gets taken as a confession.
For sure. And his quick, direct response kind of underlines how crucial it is for independent creators, especially boundary pushers, to actively manage their own narrative when things go sideways.
And that need to manage your narrative, your story, it feels even more relevant when we shift into Section 4. This is where we get into the really deep stuff. The personal struggles, the resilience, and also the interests that kind of ground him.
Yeah, and the absolute anchor here is the long road to sobriety, which isn't just one event. It's this really complex journey. Multiple attempts, relapses, often tied directly to intense life pressures.
And we have to start by understanding how early this began. The sources say he started using meth and marijuana around 12 years old.
12?
And heroin by 15. That's an incredibly difficult, traumatic start for anyone, let alone someone heading into the high-pressure world of comedy.
Yeah, that kind of early substance use, it makes you realize the career he built later was basically this decade-long tightrope walk over some serious personal turmoil. After 3 different rehab attempts, he finally got sober at 17.
17. And that first stretch of sobriety lasted 12 years, which is huge, especially while navigating the chaos of breaking into comedy, moving from San Diego to LA, all that rapid success.
Absolutely monumental, which makes the story of his first big relapse even more impactful. It broke that 12-year streak. He relapsed on Vicodin. And the trigger, according to the sources, wasn't partying or anything like that. It was directly tied to his work. He got negative feedback from a producer.
Wow. That detail says so much about the psychological toll of that industry, doesn't it? It wasn't a personal failure. It was professional rejection, or at least perceived rejection, that cracked this decade-plus sobriety. It really shows how tied up his self-worth must have been in that external validation back then.
Yeah, the pressure cooker of TV production. Rejection hits hard, and self-medication becomes the coping mechanism. But the sources also document the flip side, the second chance. His sobriety getting another boost, again tied to the industry, but this time through support.
Right. This is a story he told on Comedy Central's. This is not happening, yeah.
Yeah.
He got sober again after a MADtv producer, Lauren Dombrowski, really went to bat for him. This was after he'd apparently been fired from the show for a second time.
Imagine that. In an industry known for being pretty cutthroat, someone believes in you enough to advocate for you, give you that second chance. That moment of mentorship likely saved his career, maybe more.
But the journey, as they say, it's never really linear, is it? He admitted later on TigerBelly episode 224 that he'd relapsed again.
Yeah, much later in life. And this time, the trigger was even more profound. The death of his father in August 2019. His dad passed away from Parkinson's.
So that later relapse tied to grief, it just further humanizes the whole struggle, Shows that recovery is this ongoing thing, vulnerable to life's biggest hits, like losing a parent. After that, he went back to rehab, got sober again, and he stayed open about it, identifies as a recovering alcoholic.
And that repeated ability to use his own platforms like TigerBelly to talk about these raw moments, vulnerability, addiction, recovery, it almost transforms his personal battle into something shared, something communal. It's an act of service, maybe, but also just incredibly resilient self-documentation.
Definitely. Okay, turning briefly to relationships and family connections. We mentioned his 10-year relationship with Kalila Kuhn, his TigerBelly co-host, ended in 2022. The fact that they decided to keep co-hosting their very successful show after breaking up, is pretty remarkable, shows a real prioritizing of the creative partnership.
Yeah, over the personal friction, which can't be easy. And his younger brother, Steve Lee, he's still around, active in media too, musician, podcaster, comedian himself. Still an important part of his world, creatively and personally.
Right. And finally, just to round things out, we should touch on his personal interests and hobbies, because they offer this necessary contrast to all the intense professional demands we've been talking about. He's apparently a huge, longtime supporter of Arsenal Football Club.
Ah, a gooner. Okay.
Yep, and also a really avid fan of video games, especially the long, immersive ones. He often talks about stuff like FIFA, Stardew Valley, The Elder Scrolls, Red Dead Redemption 2, The Witcher series.
When you think about the kind of work he does, the constant public vulnerability, the energy needed for 2 big podcasts, touring stress, these hobbies make a lot of sense, don't they? Whether it's the focused distraction of watching football or just getting lost in these huge narrative RPGs like Witcher or Red Dead, it probably serves this crucial psychological need. Stability, escapism from the pressure.
Yeah, grounding the chaos, maybe. So, okay, we've covered a lot. This whole extraordinary zigzagging journey. What does it all mean when we try to synthesize the documented evidence for you, the listener?
Right, let's boil down the key takeaways. First, you just have to highlight the sheer adaptability across his career timeline. He starts as a club comic, becomes a TV sketch stalwart for almost a decade, and then pulls off this incredible pivot to independent media, co-founding TigerBelly in 2015, then Bad Friends in 2020. That shows such a sharp understanding of how media was changing.
Totally. And second, that theme of resilience. It's just unavoidable. The documented evidence of his long, hard road with sobriety, starting with drug use at 12, navigating that very specific relapse triggered by producer feedback, then the grief relapse after his father's death, doing all that while staying so public. He just hammers home that his success was won through these constant, really intense personal battles.
Yeah, he basically spun an accidental job next to a closed coffee shop into this decades-long career. He navigated the cultural stuff with his parents, survived the industry pressures that fueled addiction, and evolved from, performing roles he dreaded to becoming this indie media force who sets his own terms.
It really is the ultimate story of reclaiming your own narrative, which I guess leads us perfectly into our final provocative thought for you to chew on after this deep dive.
Okay, so considering everything we've discussed, especially those specific struggles documented early on, like the conflict with his parents about his career, that internal dread he felt playing certain racial characters on MADtv, what does his pivot to hosting Tiger Belly really signify?
Yeah, because TigerBelly is this platform he co-created, built specifically to talk about Asian American issues, sexuality, ethnicity, racism, all completely on his own terms. Does creating that kind of long-form, self-controlled, really intimate media, does it fundamentally change the game?
Hmm.
Change the relationship between the artist and the audience? Is
Sure.
it like a vital tool now for processing, controlling, and ultimately maybe mastering your own complex life story?
Something to think about for sure as you appreciate the layers and the complexity of comedy today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the truly resilient life and career of Bobby Lee.
Yeah, we hope you had a deep appreciation for not just the comedian, but the survivor and the media entrepreneur behind it all. Until next time.